Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Joe and Joe Weather Show tonight on this Thursday, the 10th of December, 2020. And the Joe and Joe Weather Show is brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware of West Babylon. That's what it looks like outside from the big parking lot in front. So there's plenty of room for your front loader or back loader or whatever you use to haul away rock salt, because they are Long Island's largest provider of rock salt. And they also have Omni Melt, Petalo calcium chloride pellets, mag ice pellets and flakes, Geomelt, Biomelt, spreaders, shovels, you name it, they have it. And they even have snow blowers too. So Omni True Value Hardware, 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, 631-756-1125, or go to the website, which is omnitruevalue.com. And tonight, sort of last minute, but as we've said many times, he is always welcome. We have National Weather Service from Upton, New York, meteorologist Bill Goodman, and of course Joe Rayo is on the bottom. Bill Goodman is off on the left. Thanks for joining us for tonight.
Joe,
Because
Joe, before you get much further, I think we will need we already need the spreaders and shovels for what's going on out on the internet concerning what may come our way on Wednesday of
Oh,
next week.
clearly. And
Yeah.
what I would really like to do tonight, because I was thinking about this in the last hour, one of the things I really would like to do tonight is when we go through everything that's going on, let's talk about the 100 or so ways that this won't happen with
Right.
regards to what is going on next week. And we can also talk about the fact, uh, I want to bring up the subject too about these snowfall forecast maps, because they're horrible tools, um, especially when they're printing out fantasy snowstorms 7, 8, 10, 15 days in advance. Before we get started, let me just say, for those of you who are on Patreon, my subscription platform, stick around, because we're going to have Bill's going to join us on the live Zoom, the weather Zoom tonight at 9 o'clock. So be sure to go to your Patreon account. I put the Zoom link up there, so you can want to park yourself in the waiting room now, you can, and I'll be letting everybody in sometime around 8:50 or 8:55. And the link to Patreon is pinned to the top of the chat board. 33 likes so far. Thanks very much. If you like what you see, please hit the like button. It helps us out greatly. We appreciate it. And we have Robert Russo, an early super chat hitter tonight. And thank you, Robert, very much for doing that. So, yeah, Joe, why don't you, because before we even get into the weather, all the talk about the solar storm and the northern lights tonight, and apparently that has fizzled somewhat from what I've been reading today. Yes. Wah, wah,
Yeah.
wah, wah, wah.
No, I have to say this. There are three types or three classifications of solar flare. There's the lowest on the list, which are the C flares. Then there's the M class and the X class. If when we get the X class flares, and every once in a while get an M class flare, that's when you can consider the chances for a big northern lights display possible. This came with a C class flare, and I said to myself, why are they making such a big deal? They being the folks over at NOAA, the Space Environment Laboratory out there in Colorado. I guess it's because the subatomic particles were supposedly heading right toward the Earth. And I guess they figured, well, if it's heading right toward us, there's a chance that this could evolve into something big. But early this morning, the first wave of activity reached the Earth, and it was anything but interesting. So that having been said, if you're hoping to see the Northern Lights tonight, you better have a ticket for Pangnirtung and none of it Northern Canada, because it's about the only place you're going to be seeing them tonight. The big Northern Lights show pretty much is not going to happen for us. But we're into a new sunspot cycle. There'll be more solar flares. Some of them will be more energetic. And hopefully, in the weeks and months to come, we'll have a shot at perhaps seeing a grand display of the northern lights in our latitudes down here, instead of having to go all the way up to Iceland or Alaska or the northern part of Canada.
Bill's got the Northern Lights going on in his living room even as we speak.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
that's the same
What
display.
class is this, Joe?
That's the same. That's the same display I had behind me last night.
Amazing how that we could do that. We do have the Geminids though for Sunday, and we're still kind of having our fingers crossed about the skies being clear Sunday night. Correct?
Yeah, it looks like, and Bill can chime in here, this cold front on Sunday will be moving on through the area. And, initially a lot of the activity was supposed to be lingering clouds and maybe a couple of hit or miss showers into Sunday night. Now it looks like the front will pretty much clear our area and hopefully dry us out enough for some clear weather for Sunday night or partially clear weather. We've got another system that looks like, Joe, it's going to be passing to our south on Monday and grazing us with some cloud cover, but then that moves out and hopefully it'll clear out for another possible view of the meteors on Monday night into early Tuesday morning. So I think we have a fighting chance of getting one, maybe both nights in of being able to view the Geminid meteor shower.
All right, so I'm going to bring up Mr. Goodman and Mr. Rayo. I'm going to bring up the 10 millibar map. We're going to go upstairs all the way to the stratosphere to start things off because uh, over the last couple of weeks we've been watching this evolve fairly carefully in terms of what's happening up there. I'm still trying to really get a feel for what's going on with regards to what happens in the stratosphere and what happens at the bottom of the atmosphere, and there's always the issue of it being coupled. And if you think back a few weeks ago, we were talking about how the polar vortex through much of the month of November was wrapped up like a tight little ball up in the Arctic. So all the cold air was trapped up there. Of course, we had an incredibly warm November here and in many areas in the Northeast. Now, it's since the just before Thanksgiving, we began to see things change up in that area. We saw a gradual rotation of the polar vortex, and it has and a stretching, and we noted that, and we also been noting how the vortex center had moved from being on the coast of Siberia, the north coast of Siberia, over to Greenland. This is the latest GFS run of it, which actually, Bill, gets to a point here in about five days where it looks like it's splitting with the one center back near the north coast of Siberia and another one trying to close off in northeastern Canada. It never really quite does that, but it's the northeastern Canada vortex part of the vortex that gains control. And then it looks like if you follow what's happening across Asia, that dark brown spot in the upper atmosphere, that is uh, warming, what looks like a serious stratospheric warming event that's occurring later in the forecast period. And we wind up with this tilted northwest southeast polar vortex with with its trough off the east coast. So, Bill, I want to ask you, is it a coincidence that the change in the vortex occurred, and then almost immediately we began to see a change in the overall pattern, particularly in the North Atlantic, where we've gone to a, I mean, I'm almost afraid to even say it, but we've gone to a negative NAO that seems to be firmly in place now, and maybe in place for at least the next several weeks.
Yeah, I mean, it did seem to happen in tandem. I'm just not sure how long that's going to last. I know that last I had looked at it, the models were kind of bringing an end to that, like a little bit after Christmas. But usually, like we've said in previous things, usually models are also a little bit too quick to do that. So maybe we're holding on probably through at least the rest of the month of December with that negative NAO.
But is this tilt in the vortex the way it's positioned here in 16 days? Uh, doesn't it accomplish the same thing if it couples down to the surface where you're getting a cold air flow from the Arctic down into northeastern Canada?
That part I'm not sure, and you might even know better than
Because
me.
I remember Judah Cohen, Dr. Judah Cohen, I had asked him once about that, and he said yes on that respect. If this is coupled to the bottom of the atmosphere, then you do have the way the tilt of the trough is would tend to suggest that the drive of cold air will be open to coming down into eastern Canada and into the Northeast.
Yeah, that
Assuming it couples. That's, I think, is the big question. And so far, it has.
yeah, that's the question. I know Judah. He did post something on Twitter, I think, not too long ago, saying that even though there's that warming event taking place, he what he saw was the polar vortex like holding strong in the face of that. So that whatever happens would be fairly stable once it gets I guess once it gets in place.
Right. Now, the other thing I want to bring up, because I sent you these maps, and Joe, you and I have been talking. We looked at the CFS a couple of times. I think I mentioned, was it yesterday or the day before, that the CFS looked like it had flipped from what it had not too relatively recently, which was basically warm forever and ever all across the country. And I noticed today, let's see which is the last run available. So let's hope it's consistent from what I sent you, Bill, from which was from overnight. But judging from the CFS, now all of a sudden, when we get into that first week of January, we've got troughing here in the eastern part of the U.S. with below normal heights at the 500 millibar level, all the way down into almost to Florida.
Wow.
And then here's the week that follows. So this is January 7th to 14th, which has below normal heights just to our north, above normal heights just to our south, and we're kind of in normal land, and that holds through the 14th to the 21st. You said to me that maybe this is going to match up with some of the La Ninas where we wind up with moderate cold and maybe some snow chances along the way, rather than the other alternative, which is the rather warm and rather dry outcome.
Yeah, that was. I mean, I saw that start to take shape over the last couple of days in the European model. I don't know if you have those. You have
I have them ready for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess if we first looking at the European model, what the prediction is for about the time frame from about the January the 5th through the 12th. If we look at that, and I'm gonna have to pull it up on my side too.
Whoops. Hold on. Okay, so here's the first one.
Okay. I see it on my side. Okay, yeah, here we go. Now, I mean,
Is this the right one?
Okay, it's the one ECMWF weeklies. Is that the?
Yeah, initialized. Yes, that's what's on days 29 to 30 through 36.
Yeah. Now, I guess the interesting things that we see here are that you have the polar vortex that's kind of set up in northeast Canada, below normal heights in western Canada, and then I guess above normal heights at 500 that run from the southern tier of the and in the eastern U.S. all the way across the Atlantic to Scandinavia. You have that above normal height in the Pacific as well. And this is we're just talking about correlation, which isn't causations. We're just trying to find things in the pattern that kind of correspond to cold and snow of past winters. Now, if we look at that, and then we look at, I guess there's another graphic that I.
All right, let me see if I get it to it. There's two here.
Yeah, there's one with the actual 500 millibar heights that are from composite, I guess,
so
for
this one here?
La Nina winters.
Or is
that
it
the one that shows the anomalies?
Okay, so this is, let's see, this one here is the geopotential height anomaly.
Yeah, and if you go back and forth between that and the European, you do see some similarities. The things that jump out at me are the same idea: the polar vortex up in northeast Canada, your greatest 500 millibar negative height anomalies across western Canada, and then above normal going from the eastern U.S. all the way to Scandinavia and area from Siberia to the North Pacific. So there are some similarities. So that could be interesting. I think we're looking maybe at a potentially pretty cold period then. So
well, if you look at this on this map, Bill, and compare it to what's happening now, you have the higher height anomalies out, as you said, over Scandinavia. But right now, those higher height anomalies are actually further west in that area between Scandinavia and Greenland. And in fact, it's on some
That's right.
During some time periods, it runs over Greenland. And also, you have above normal heights through all of the Arctic region. So we're even though the Pacific side of the equation is not what you would like it to be, because that kind of cuts off the Arctic air from coming down. Uh, do you think that the super strong negative Arctic oscillation, higher pressures across the Arctic region, the strong NAO, the North Atlantic oscillation, so higher pressures up in the North Atlantic and lower pressures in the middle latitudes, is that enough to compensate for not having a cross a what's the phrase I'm looking for here? Uh,
Cross polar
yeah,
flow.
the cross polar flow.
Yeah, the word cross in there. I figured that was where you were
Right.
going.
Instead of having a cross polar flow, we're getting polar air that's coming in more from the east and northeast with higher pressures that are going to tend to build in southeastern Canada, because that's what's happening for what might happen on for the middle of next week.
Well, I think that's a good sign if you're a snow lover, because if you have blocking Greenland, you're going to get probably lower heights over like near Labrador, that old classic 50-50 low, as we like to call it. And I guess to the rear of that, a little bit west of that, is where you get upper level confluence, and beneath that, surface high pressure from eastern Canada into New England. That's going to be the cold air supply for anything that we get next week.
And I switched over now to your third graphic, the 20th century reanalysis of the heights, the average heights in the upper atmosphere. Um, this doesn't look half bad, actually, when I look at this.
That's the composite for snowy and cold winters. And granted, the sample set is pretty small, but it's funny that two separate winters showed pretty much the same. You know, that they agreed very strongly on the composite if you look at them individually. And yeah, look at that. It looks like the polar vortex set up shop in there in northeast Canada, and you don't really see this on this map. You need to look at the anomalies, but the 500 millibar heights, I guess in the subtropical regions are in winters like this, are either average or below average. So
I'd like to also point out, again, this is based upon a relatively small sample or whatever, but 1934, I believe 1934 was the year that New York Central Park got to its lowest temperature on record, minus 15 degrees on
that is
February
right.
9th. So
Was that with snow cover? I'm
I,
just curious if there was snow on the ground, because can you
I would
imagine it was that cold and there wasn't any snow on the ground?
I would think we'd have to have some kind of decent snow cover for it to get that low, even that early in the 20th century,
I
for
know
it
it.
to be
I
like
know
the lowest.
when that cold high pulled out. I remember doing some research on it. When that cold high pulled out, a couple of days later, it warmed up and rained. I don't know if it was one of those cases where they never saw a flake or an ice pellet, but that would be the ultimate to be that cold. And then when the cold air pulls out, it warm up and rain. I got the teleconnections up, and I want to bring this up, Bill. I need you to pull some strings. Could you please tell the ESRL folks? You know, they used to do that one graphic where they had the four-panel teleconnections. They had the PNA, the NAO, the EPO, and
Uh,
uh, and the WPO. They're not doing it anymore. They stopped it, and now I can't find an EPO graphic. So if they can maybe either make an EPO graphic like this or bring back the one they had, because that was so easy to go to once a day. Um, let them know that I'm requesting this. I'm sure they'll run to do it.
Oh, I don't know. I think they have bigger fish to fry. We're trying to conserve bandwidth across the weather service.
Yeah, I saw the story in the Washington Post. I think let's talk about that a bit later on, because I want to ask you about that. Here's the NAO now, by the way, for the next couple of weeks. A couple of members toward the end bring it up to the neutral line, but most of the members are all -1 to -2 standard deviations from the mean, all negative. And that is fairly, that looks like that's going to hang on. The Arctic oscillation is super duper negative here as we head into mid month. There are a few members that go sharply positive toward the end of the month, but the vast majority of them stay strongly negative right through the end of the month. So that's a good sign. And Bill, even the PNA actually goes positive in a few days, and not a lot, but it does go slightly positive. And it looks like all of the members keep it positive pretty much through the end of the month. So that might help a little bit to, um, maybe weaken that trough that seems to be dominating parts of the along and just off the west coast.
Yeah, I see that, and it's funny. I was looking at I was actually reviewing some winter storm. I guess some indicators for heavy snow. There was something that Glenn Hurricane Schwartz and Dave Tollers had put together for I think for high school for someone in high school in the Philly area to use. And one of the things they pointed out is when you get the PNA going from negative to positive in rapid fashion like that, that's actually something that's an ingredient to look out for. That kind of surprised me. I figured you just wanted it in place, but that trend toward positive right when we're about to get that storm is pretty interesting.
Right, and I remember somebody also saying about the NAO when the NAO is deeply negative and it makes that run toward the neutral line. When it does it rapidly, that's also usually a fairly reliable storm signal. Just doesn't tell you where, which is always the issue.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. If you look at the latest European, let's see what the latest Euro ensemble. Actually, that's I'm looking at teleconnections.
I have it. I got it. Hold on.
That stays
EPS.
negative right through Christmas.
So let's look at the European ensembles. The ensembles. I'll bring up all of North America here. Now I have it at day 10. Let me roll it back.
I got to tell you too, guys. I mean, like all of a sudden now, everybody's talking about a big storm for the middle of next week, and yet 2 days ago, this big storm wasn't even on the radar, so to speak. Now all of a sudden it's there, and I'm looking at every ever so slight differences between the 12Z GFS run and the 18Z, where it appears that the associated trough is not quite so dynamic as it was with the primary 12Z run. And who's to say in the coming days that this thing doesn't end up flattening out and disappointing the snow lovers? I just
Well,
don't see it.
there could be. Look, we've been stressing the fact that when you have multiple streams, you're going to have all these different timing and strength differences from run to run, and you're going to see these, these variations. Uh, Listen, what about the fact that if the northern jet, like the GFS, had a few runs back where it phased with something in the northern jet, and you wound up taking a low just inland of the coast, and it would be mostly rain, except for well up into upstate New York or up into northern New England. That could still happen. Uh,
Sure.
that certainly could still happen. And Joe, I think you're right. I think the other possibility is if the timing is off, if you wind up with something in the southern stream that's not quite as deep, that winds up being flat. That's the Canadian. The Canadian did that today versus yesterday when it had a fairly wrapped up. The Canadian, the GFS today, earlier today, looked like the Canadian did yesterday.
Yeah.
And then the Canadian today came out where it's so flat, like a board, that you would barely get clouds here out of that. All the get rain move off the southeast coast. So
But
there's
it's ensemble though is on board for snow.
yes,
Right.
and
John Charles knows me very well on the chat board. He says, "But Joe, you don't like the 18Z runs."
that's
And,
right.
and, Jason,
Let's bring that right. Exactly. Yes.
and Jason Barry follows that up with, "And anyway, winter was over 3 days ago."
Yeah. By the way, I'm looking here. I got that the EPS for the European, the ensemble for the European. The blockiness of it is there. I mean, you see the lower pressures in the mid latitudes. You've got a closed upper high. Obviously it's an average, but you actually have two closed upper highs, one over Greenland and the other one to the west in the open Arctic Ocean. Uh, this is the driver. All of this here is the driver, and if it weren't for that, we'd have a screaming Pacific jet running across the country, and we'd be above normal temperatures all the way through. There wouldn't be any cold air building down into eastern Canada, and it would be any precip would be rain, not just here but probably inland as well.
Well, I think the best advice right now, and I looked over some of the technical discussions for, I looked at Boston, I looked at New York and Philadelphia and Albany, and they're all basically saying the same. It's the same script that you can pull out in this type of pattern a week in advance, and that is, well, it looks interesting, but it's still too far off. And
Right.
so, in New York, they're saying, well, the rain along the coast, maybe some snow inland, maybe some snow for everybody toward the end, blah, 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 blah. You know, and meanwhile, you put these discussions out, you say to yourself, with caution, we're looking at this and that, and yet then you get the person who lives next door to my son, and my son called me up somewhat distressed at 3:30 this afternoon and says, say, Dad, are we going to get a 15-inch snowstorm on Wednesday? And I said, where the heck did you hear that? He said, well, the guy next door said that we're going to get a 15-inch snow. He heard
Right.
about it.
Meteorologist next door neighbor said. Well, my rule, Bill. You know my rule. I don't know, Joe, if you might have heard me mention the practice of unauthorized meteorology, which normally occurs on supermarket checkout lines.
That's right.
So usually, what you do in response to that, of course, you should be wearing your mask, but in response to that, you pull the violator aside and gently inform them of what they're doing. And then you take a very large frozen leg of lamb and you swing it like you want to hit a home run.
Well, you got some guys on television, some weathercasters, and they start showing you like 5 and 6 days in advance. Well, here's the amount that the GFS is saying, and here's the amount that the European model is saying, and the Canadian is saying this, and this one's saying that. 5 and 6 days out. This one says 14 inches. However, this model says 3 inches. And this one says 4 inches.
It's also because it's the first. It might be the first one, and we emphasize the word might. It might be the first one. So everybody's
serious grain of salt, because the models that far out are probably too wet to begin with. So you can take 20% off right there. You can take another 20% off for snow ratios that are probably too high in the model.
And then you're going to wind up with a
coating. Your 15 inches goes down to like 7.
A coating to an inch.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but still.
All right, so I got the 500 here from the GFS from the 12Z run, because Joe Rayo doesn't like 18Z runs, and of course.
Nor do I,
right.
except the NAM.
Oh, except
18Z,
the NAM.
18Z NAM. If I like the trend from the 12Z, that's a different story. That's for something happening the next day.
All right. So here we go with the system for the weekend, which really is important because that starts the setup for next week. And we run through Sunday, and then on Monday, of course, we've got this short wave that moves off the southeast coast. You've got a trough that's swinging through eastern Canada, and suddenly you get a situation where you wind up. It's not quite a 50-50 low, but there's a trough that's there in that general vicinity, and there's also lower pressures out in the eastern Atlantic near the Azores, and that's not going anywhere. That's one of the reasons why this ridge, this tendency for ridging along 40 West and on up through Greenland, I think holds on for a long period of time. Here are the higher heights and pressures up into the north, lower pressures from Newfoundland and out into the open waters of the Atlantic. So that forces the next trough to drop down into upper low in Illinois. I think the most important part of this is the fact that the northern stream is not phasing with it, at least from the standpoint of that prior run, and that helps a rather strong high to not only build into southeastern Canada, but it actually holds there. And then, of course, this trough swings east, and it was fairly impressive on this run. Gets into the Gulf of Maine, and then it goes out, and then on we wait to see what happens with the next thing that swings around after that, and then the next thing that swings around after that. So it is definitely a very active pattern, and the blockiness and those those higher up heights and pressures up in the northern latitudes making all the difference in the world here.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
What can you say? I mean, what else can you say after all of that, except that it's going to change?
Exactly.
I do I do have to say though, the models have a nasty habit of getting something right a week in advance and then
losing it and then bringing it back.
5, and then then you get the rude awakening, and all of a sudden you got to go back to what you saw a week ago. I hope that, I mean, depending on if you're a snow lover, then this is good. If you're not, well, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. And I mean, you can't just take them off verbatim. I mean, or even if you do, you can still trick out things like low tracks and things like that, and see whether they make sense with with what's going on with the temperatures at the surface. I have some problems with what the Europeans doing. I think it's a little bit too far north to be as cold as it is.
Right. So I have to tell you, it's been so long since it has been so long since we've had a situation where we've had this negative North Atlantic oscillation set up, where we're seeing a nice high building up in eastern Canada and actually holding on the 12Z run in particular, just holds there. So you've got this cold, this cold wedge that's building down New England and bleeding cold air down into our neck of the woods. That high is still there come Thursday morning. It hasn't even moved offshore. It's up in north of Maine, north of New Brunswick. And then, of course, the low, by the time we get to Thursday morning, most of it's over with anyway. But this is important. If it stays unfazed, you're going to have this big high to the north. But one of the other ways that this could not happen is if that suppose that high is even stronger and you wind up with something coming out from the southern stream that maybe is not dynamic. This could all get suppressed even further south. That's the danger of the NAO. If you want it there, but if it's too strong, then you're going to shift everything even further south, and that's when you wind up seeing snow in Virginia and North Carolina. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the NAO has been trending stronger with every day that we look at it. Who knows where the ultimate outcome is going to be? So I would be, I'm with you guys, certainly with the idea of being very cautious with regards to coming to any sort of conclusions one way or another on a Thursday evening when we're talking about something that's still almost 6 days away.
Yep, those are the ones that really you have to be very careful. And I tell people, look, when the thing is within 84 hours, which is 3.5 days, then we start getting into all right. Let's sit down and start discussing the facts. But when you're beyond 84 hours, and as you just pointed out, Joe, about 6 days out, anything can happen. I mean, there's a lot of room for waffling between now and next week with this system.
Right, but we do know what the puzzle pieces are, and I just want to, since everybody sees it anyway, if I put up the snow map, no one's gonna, it's not like I'm doing something really horrific here. Here's a close-up view of the 12Z GFS run with the low off the Virginia coast. Starts out as rain along the immediate coast, then changes over fairly quickly to snow because of that cold high to the north, and then the low moves out by Thursday morning, and it produced some significant snow amounts. If you use a 10-to-1 ratio, write it down: 21 inches at Bridgeport, 19 in Rockland County, 10 at Kingston. It looks like 6 on the Jersey Shore, 13 just north and west of Trenton. I mean, is this not biblical? I mean, it's gospel, is it not?
How much did that last one produce up in New England? Did it?
Well, and which model was guilty of being the most aggressive, the most ridiculously aggressive? It was the European.
Yeah.
That went off the wall with some numbers. It's actually going off the wall again. I've got the European snow map for this from a courtesy of Pivotal Weather, and it's producing some 20-inch amounts in southern New England, back down in the lower Hudson Valley to northeastern New Jersey. This is. I wonder if the European, is the European having some kind of problem? Because lately, I just think the model has not done well.
They're probably tinkering with it, trying to make it better, and in the process of making it better, they're only making it worse, which again leads to the old saying: if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Oh,
Exactly.
I'd still go back to the Ada model from the '90s if I could, with the way how good it was.
Hey, that Ada
What's
model,
that?
the Ada model. Joe, you and I were talking about that week in 1994, the last
Right,
days of
right,
January, that first week of February,
right.
where we had those two snowstorms with
Back to back.
back to back. I'm back, by the way. I got everybody on the full screen again. Um, how the Ada came in just as it was getting into range, and I remember going on the air saying, and no other model had it. Uh, and I went on the air saying it looks like we may get another big storm at the end of the week. And Joe, you can relate to this. I got the, well, nobody else is saying it. Well, and then fill in the blank with your favorite forecaster name. So and so isn't talking about it. They ran the whole litany. They apparently had the time in the newsroom to watch every other person's weathercast that was on in the city of New York in order to compare it to mine.
Yeah, well, that was quite a, back to back. I think about the end of the second storm, we had, there was some place that total like 15 or 16 inches. It was like crazy,
Yeah, that's
really.
the one I said when it ended, Bill. I don't know. Were you? You probably you weren't here on Long Island at the time. When
No,
that
I was down in the Washington D.C. area, getting doused with freezing rain. We had
well,
huge events that winter down there.
we changed over to freezing rain after getting about a foot of snow. We changed over to free. It was freezing rain here with a temperature. I never forgot this. Freezing rain with a temperature of 12.
Yeah.
12. And then the next when it was over, the next morning, it was 2 below 0 at my house.
Wow.
And Bill, you're not that far away from my house, so you can relate to that.
And
Yeah, that's
and Joe, what was Mud Creek?
Yeah, in East Patchogue. But that was an incredible week. That was just that 1994, 93, 94. But that stretch in from January to mid March, it was just like a bowling alley with one storm after another after another. Every 3 days we had snow in the forecast. It was like a couple of inches or a 3 to 4 inch event or whatever it was. But it was one after another and they all came at rush hour.
Right, right. I could remember trying to get home one night. It took me from Flushing, Queens to Levittown. During one of those storms, it took me like the better part of 4 hours to get home.
Just
Uh,
crazy
one of
stuff.
one of the longest, arduous periods of trying to drive to get home. And when I actually got into the driveway, I actually was like jumping up and down, like, I made it! I made it! Uh,
yeah.
Was
You had a great winter up here for that. Down in the Washington D.C. area, it was almost all freezing rain. The one event that looked like snow, I was so excited, and then when it started as sleet. And boy, did I just like go inside and hang my head in disgust. We had 3 inches of sleet on the ground by the time it was all over.
I just wanted to mention, by the way, we have 71 likes on the board. If you like what you see, folks, hit the like button. We really do appreciate it greatly when you do. 72 likes, not too shabby. And we got 202 folks on at the same time, plus a very busy and active chat board, which is also always good to see. So, all right. So, look, the bottom line is we really don't know what's going to happen at this point. It's still too early in the game. So uh,
do you
we'll just
remember? Do you
we'll,
remember what? There was a storm. They called it the Phantom Storm back in 2001 because everybody played it up real big time, many days in advance. And when it finally came, we got nothing or hardly anything.
which one was that? What year was
I
that,
think that was
Joe?
in March of 2001.
Oh, that was the storm of the century for Philadelphia.
Right,
They
exactly. In fact,
almost ran a certain forecaster out of town on a rail. Do you know that I got 2 feet out of that?
JB
Yeah.
JB
Yeah.
he broke into a network show, which and said announced we're heading for the storm of the century. This is 5 days away, and he broke in Philadelphia to tell everybody about the storm of the century that was coming. And needless to say, the network officials were not too pleased by him
Do you,
doing that.
do you know I actually got 2 feet of snow out of that?
Right? Yeah. It was a weird type of situation where everybody was waiting. It was, I think, on a Sunday night, Monday morning for heavy snow, and as it
Yep.
turned out, the thing finally did boil up or roll up. But by the time it did, it was mostly to the east of most areas. But you were out on central eastern Long Island, Joe.
Yeah, it
You
snow.
did get hit.
Yeah, you had to be because I don't. If I remember correctly, uh, they didn't get too much in New York City, maybe a few inches, but it was one of those wonderful Suffolk County storms where you're the only one snowing. You know, the
Yep.
whole the whole eastern part of the island just every hour just kept going on and on and on. It was quite impressive, uh, but yeah,
One to three in JB country where I was at the time.
we're up to 92 likes, by the way. So we're 8 shy. Yeah, let's get it over 100, folks. If you like what you see, hit that like button. Really do appreciate it. Let's do a little bit of. Let me see if I can find it. We'll do a little bit of. By the way, Philadelphia put up. Well, I always say Philadelphia when it's Mount Holly, but it's like when I say New
I'm
York
glad you,
City, and
I
it's
know what you're
Upton.
about to mention, Joe.
The
I know what you're
freezing
about to mention.
fog. They put up a freezing fog advisory.
Now that's a good.
You don't see
The
that up
question,
there
Bill,
too often.
why didn't you just latch onto that and extend that up into northern New Jersey? Or you didn't think we were going to have enough freezing fog up there?
Yeah.
No idea. Don't shoot me. It was my day off. I had. I mean, listen, that's a hazard. I think some of these freezing rain and freezing, anything that's depositing a sheet of ice onto bare ground is those are like end up being our worst events in terms of impact in the whole winter. Accidents, people going to the hospital. It's I mean, there was something that happened just a day or two before that in Connecticut that was the thing.
By the way,
Think much.
Scott Briller, who is out on working tonight, he's doing COVID runs. Um, and he asked this question, which I'm getting on a separate chat here. Do you happen to know, Bill, what is the most consecutive days that New York City, as measured by the park, has had at least one inch of snow on the ground?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Consecutive days.
That one I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but that's a good stat. I probably could have told you when I worked at Mount Holly. I think when I was there late, early 2000s, we actually broke the record for that while we were down there. That's all I can tell you. I know more about that than I know about New York.
He also said, by the way, in February 1934, the year that New York City hit 15 below zero, Central Park had 28 inches of snow for the month. So it was. I imagine that's up there in the top 10 or snowiest Februarys on record.
Yeah, that was a big one. I think. Yeah, last time I was on, we had some stats from that. I remember that very snowy, very cold, and not just in February either. I think even December of that month had some below zero, if I remember correctly.
They actually, if you look at I love going back and looking at the New York Times because they are really the newspaper of record. And I went back and looked at 1934, February 9th, and they actually put on the front page record low of 14.6 degrees, but they measured that not at Central Park, but they measured that at the Whitehall
Whitehall.
building. Whitehall
I thought it
building.
was Whitehall.
Yeah, and that's and they showed you one of the and this guy looked like he was in his 60s, and he's out there at the outside the building looking at one of these old-fashioned wooden shelters, weather station shelters, and he's got a very sad look on his face while he's taking the temperature, looking at the quote record temperature for New York City. And I got the feeling that he did not like having that job or having to do that job. And I guess somebody was ready to take that picture for the New York Times. By the way, the Whitehall building was not air conditioned. So 2 years later, in 1936, when they had record highs of like 106 degrees, all the people who worked at the weather office or weather service back then, the Weather Bureau, as it was called, no air conditioning. They had the windows wide open, trying to stay cool. That must have been really blistering to have to work in that kind of condition.
Can't even imagine that. They had windows. That's amazing to me.
Yeah,
we
well, they had to open up that window to at least let some of the cool sea air in, I think. But
I didn't think weather people were allowed to have windows.
yeah, back then they did apparently.
I was always lucky working at Channel 11 because we had huge windows. I was one of the few weather people in New York that actually had windows to be able to look out and see what happens. Of course, you've got tall buildings all around you, so you just have to hope you can see what falls in between them.
Right.
Bill, touch on that Washington Post story I saw today with regards to the Weather Service having to save bandwidth. What's that about?
All right. Well, I guess we're popular. I guess that's one good way of looking at it. I think it's we're almost too popular. We have so much bandwidth. It's starting to get it's we've used it up to the point where it's starting maybe to interfere with some of our products and services getting out in a timely fashion. So something needs to be done about that. And I don't know what's going to be done. I'm at the at the forecast office level, and those type of things are decided up. Those things are decided down at headquarters down in the Washington D.C. area.
Right. So some big cheese needs to sign off on the budget.
Well, it could be that, or maybe just looking and see, okay, what kind of things are we sending out there that nobody's using? Maybe it's time to do a little bit of
House cleaning.
house cleaning. Of course, before a big winter storm, everybody's hitting the NCEP website to see what does the GFS have at 66 hours or something like that.
Right. Well, look, talk to ESRL and get them to get that graphic back. Yeah, that's a flat graphic. It's a JPEG or a PNG. It can't possibly use a lot of bandwidth just to get that graphic back on. Because either that I'd love to see a graphical representation of the East Pacific Oscillation, and I've looked around all over the place. And nobody seems to have one. Even the universities, some of the, like University of Wisconsin, had a whole bunch of stuff about all the teleconnections, but none of them have a real-time representation of model forecasts for the EPO. And I always that's of the all the teleconnections, that's the one that I like the most when it comes to the wintertime. I mean, I could visually do it by figuring it out by looking at the map and seeing where the pressure changes are on the Pacific side. But it's always better to have it graphically, just kind of look at the graphic and forego that exercise. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree with you. Was that one of the indices that CPC had that they had ditched in favor of something else? I seem to recall along those lines.
They've got the AAO on there. Isn't that the Antarctic Oscillation?
Yeah.
I don't know why they have that, but I guess somebody wants it there for whatever reason.
Influences will be in some other kind of trouble.
Yeah, yeah, I guess so. Scott didn't leave me any questions for today, so we'll have to postpone for another day. Jess Harden, who wants that snow in Alabama. Do you think that the polar vortex is going to split this year? Bill, what do you think? There's been talk again about that, split of the PV. The one time it did, it never. A couple of years ago, it never coupled with the bottom of the atmosphere. We sat here in February and March, waiting for something to happen, and it never did. Is it? You think it's going to split come at some point, sometime in January?
I don't know.
Does it matter? I mean, does it really matter? I take my chances with what we've got now. If we keep this pattern all winter long, we're bound to get something good out of it at some point from a snow standpoint. If you're a snow lover, I'm a snow lover. I admit it. Okay.
Yeah, I tell you, at least for the near term, I think if the middle of next week ends up being a miss, we still have the overall pattern, and I've seen that happen in the past where the first event or first couple of events don't really pan out, but something farther down the road does. And the fact that the NAO is going from negative, its sharp increase is closer to Christmas time. Maybe if we don't get this one, maybe it'll be another one farther down the road.
All right. Hey, Joe, just
Yes.
remind everybody, because we're going to wrap it up here. Remind everybody what you're going to do tomorrow night.
Well, tomorrow night, unless we see a sudden change in the weather conditions for next week, where everybody's buzzing about that, I'm going to present the talk that I gave to a number of libraries here in the Lower Hudson Valley on the Geminid meteor shower coming up. Now, if you're wondering what it's all about, what causes it, why it happens, how can you observe it to its greatest extent, I'll my talk tomorrow night will do that, and we'll build that into our Joe and Joe show. And of course, we'll also talk about the weather either before the talk or after the talk. We'll talk about the weather prospects for seeing the meteors on Sunday and Monday night, and also, of course, talking about the big storm Wednesday of
Yes.
next week.
Yeah, and I
It
would
says
just
tongue firmly planted in cheek.
I would emphasize to folks to not go off the deep end on this yet. I know it's the first one, and all the snow lovers are all revved up and excited, and everything winds up being for to some people on social media, everything is epic. It'll be an epic snowstorm. It's epic cold. It's epic this. It's epic that. You'd be surprised how few times epic happens. Okay, let it happen first, and if it winds up being epic, then you label it. You never label it before. If you're smart, you never label it before. And this one does not show signs of being quote epic anyway. It'll be some it could easily just wind up being a coating to a couple of inches, or maybe a little bit more, or maybe nothing at all, or maybe it rains. Am I right?
Absolutely. We've seen it happen over and over and over again over all these many years that you and I have been doing this. And to add Bill in to the picture, and we probably have more than 100 years of experience in this game.
Yeah. What? 40, 40. What about you, Bill? 30? Because you're 10 years younger than both of us. he
Something
said
like
with a
that.
he said with a scowl.
I got it. Well, I got into the game in the '90s. So, but how many? How many?
So 30 years.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So we got 110 years.
See, we go back, Joe and I, we go back to the days of Harold Gibson.
Oh, that's right.
A
One of the guys
long,
from
long
30
time.
Rock from the old Office.
Yeah.
And and
When they used to go measure the snow after a snowstorm on the car tops on 49th Street. I'm not kidding.
and
I can say that now because most of those guys are no longer with us, so
yes,
they can't argue with me. But the truth, but they didn't want to make the 9 block walk to Central Park, and it was during a time of some budget cuts that they didn't have anybody that would go. So they would just go out the door, measure it on the car tops, and maybe do a little bit of adjusting, and that's what we got.
and the other big news for Joe and Joe, we have a date set, Joe, for Mr. Corbell, Bill Corbell, formerly of News 12 Long Island, formerly of WOR's Rambling with Gambling show, formerly at WCBS News Radio 88. And Bill is going to be our guest on Tuesday nights.
Only I have more formalies than he does. Well, we love Bill so much that we waived the guest appearance fee. Um, and we also waived what else did I waive, Joe? I waived the guest appearance fee, and there was something else that I waived.
um, I'd have to
I
go back.
forgot. Oh, and the $1.99 inconvenience fee. We can't forget that. We love you, Bill. Just joking.
Thanks. Well, don't worry. I don't think my employer would take too kindly
No,
to
yeah, you don't want to. Yeah, there's
stuff. So
no invoices. We're kidding, folks. We're kidding.
yeah.
Okay.
Oh, by the way, while we were talking, I did get an answer to the not the wait. I don't know if it was the number of days. Oh wait, yeah, I do. This greatest number of consecutive days of 1 inch at Central Park. It was 1947 to 48, 56 days, and I'm imagining that probably started with the December storm that year, which formerly held the record for
Right.
snowfall in the city.
That was the one that they were supposed to get flurries. it was predicted snow showers and flurries the day after Christmas in 1947, and they got 26.4 inches of flurries.
That was one of Tom Morgan's from the Weather Service, one of the one of the best forecasters I ever had the uh, pleasure of knowing, uh, including you, Bill. I mean, it's a pleasure knowing you for sure. And you're definitely great at what you do. Tom Morgan was one of these old Brooklyn guys. He had the worst Brooklyn accent you could possibly imagine, and he would do midnights. He would fall asleep. He would be typing up a discussion on an old CRT. This was long before laptops and desktops and everything else. He was typing it up. He would be typing up the discussion, and then he would stop, and you would look at him, and he would fall asleep. He would be asleep with his head down, and he would nap for like 20 or 30 minutes, and then he would just wake right up and keep typing for whatever the last word was that he stopped before he fell asleep. The next word, you go and read it, it would the flow would continue. It's as if he stopped the thought. He just shut the thought down for that 15 or 20-minute cat nap, and then he would wake up and start it right exactly where he left off. And he talked about he had all the old maps from the 47 storm, and he talked about what happened that night in terms of what was going on synoptically, and how it turned out to be the burial that it was.
And you know who was working at the weather office back then in 1947? I
Uh,
don't know if he was as a forecaster or as an associate or whatever. Dr. Frank Field.
oh, probably, yeah.
Really?
Frank Field, I think was
And Abe Zwicker.
and Abe Zwicker. Oh, Abe Zwicker. Abe Zwicker chased me away. I was with Stan Getzelman's synoptic meteorology class, and we were on a field trip, and we went up to 30 Rock, and we were walking around and looking at everything. And I was near it was a huge, big microphone that they used to use for KW035, and they also used to do the weather on WNYC radio in New York, the city-run radio station. So I'm near that big mic, and I was going to touch it, and Abe Zwicker, and I knew it was Abe because I recognized the voice. I said, "Hey, get away from there!" No.
He liked me. I don't. Abe was an old curmudgeon, so I don't. But he took to me, and I took to him. He was always. He was very kind to me. One of the nicest people that I encountered at the Weather Service. He was a great guy. He really was. Underneath that gruff exterior, he was a great guy. He taught me a few things, weather-wise, and I've never forgotten him. He was a good man. God rest him.
What, he died?
I would imagine so.
No.
I mean, we're talking, when I knew him, he was in his 60s, and that was 40 years ago. So, I mean,
Professor
I'm assuming.
at City College show, Professor Ehrlich. I don't know, you remember him.
Yeah.
I saw Stan Getzelman a few years ago, one of my other professors, and we were talking about the professors, and he said, "Well, if Dr. Ehrlich is still around, he's over 100 years old now." So,
Well, you know who is still around, by the way, along those lines, is Sister Charles Edwards. It's Sister Germaine. Bill, Joe and I are just recounting our Catholic school experiences with nuns who never die.
Oh.
They
Yeah, I got a little bit of that, but no raps on the knuckles or anything like that.
Oh no,
oh, Bill,
he had Sister Charles Edwards.
What you
Okay.
missed, Bill? I used to tell my wife. I told my wife about the stories about Sister Charles Edwards, and she said, "Oh, you're making all this up. Not making it up, but you're exaggerating. It couldn't be like that. It couldn't be that way." So I emailed my friend Andrew Maniglia, who was the former deputy mayor of Yonkers and went to St. Benedict School, and I said, "Renata doesn't believe any of the stories I told her about Sister Charles Edwards." He sent her an email back, and the only thing the email said was, "Joe speaks the truth!" Exclamation point. Oh, God.
The name alone should send fear up and down down
It did.
anyone's
How many people
spine
out there, if any of you out there are from St. Benedict's Parish from
in the
40
Bronx.
years or 50 years ago in the Bronx, let us know and tell us your experiences.
You could have a Sister Charles Edwards class reunion. All right, we got to go.
Oh, so we got three Bronx boys on here then.
Yes, 3 Bronx boys. All right, so we got to go, but Bill's going to hang around because at 9 o'clock For Patreon members, we're going to do our weekly weather Zoom. So if you've got specific questions, you can ask him directly. So that'll be coming up in about 28 minutes. So the link is up there on the chat board. If you're a Patreon member, it'll take you straight to your page. If you're not, it'll take you to a page where you can subscribe. All right. So have a great night, everybody. Joe and I will be back tomorrow. We'll see you then. Bill, thanks for being here.
Sure,
We'll,
always a pleasure. Thank you for
right.
having me.
This tonight's show was two Joes and a Bill.
Yes, it certainly was. And
2 turntables and a microphone.
and one more. I have to do one more thing before we say good night, and that is. Hang on, just a moment, please. I need to learn how to switch this, faster than I do. I'm slow on the uptake when it comes to this sort of stuff. Where is it? Oh, this is not fair.
While you're doing that, Joe, let me just also mention one other thing. I had the great pleasure of talking this afternoon with Wayne Cabot, morning anchor at WCBS News Radio 880, talking with him about the Geminid shower. And if any of you are commuting tomorrow morning and listening to Morning Drive, you may hear my dulcet tones talking with Wayne about the shower. He's so kind, Joe. He said we could do it one of 2 ways. We could either pre-tape it right now to run tomorrow morning, or I can wake you up at 6 a.m. and we could do it then.
So needless to say, you pre-taped it.
I'll do it the early. I'll do it in the former as opposed to the latter. So.
And our show tonight, the Joe and Joe Weather Show, brought to you by Omni True Value Hardware of West Babylon, New York, Long Island's largest rock salt provider and a provider of everything you need to get through winter storms this season. 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon. Their telephone number 631-756-1125. The best prices in town.